main stage for the Marvel presentation.
All right, we're ready. Woo! Woo! Excitement level just really escalated right there. All right, good. So we got our next presenters up, ready to go. We're going to be this is going to be a great one again, another really good presentation. So I'm going to stop talking and hand it over to these two gentlemen, the boys up here. Everybody, Marvel Studios, give them a round of applause.
Hi guys. Hello. Thanks for showing up. My name is Tully Summers. This is Ian Joyner, and we're here representing Marvel, obviously. I'm going to start off with just a quick overview of a smattering of our work, our personal work, and recent stuff before we get into the Marvel stuff. Do you want anything to say?
No, I think that sounds like a good plan.
All right. So this is a personal piece that I did. It's
Wait. I think you should tell them a little bit about your past, how you came into this industry.
all right. I started a long time ago, back when they made models and physical effects. So started in the model shop, kicked around the creature shops for a while, doing traditional sculpture on prosthetics and creature suits, and ended up in art departments making monsters and creatures. So.
And not to put an age on anything, but just how long have you been working in the industry, would you say?
Long time.
A very long time. Right? He's worked on some amazing projects, like stuff that we all grew up loving.
So
awesome.
Zbrush has been fantastic because I started as a traditional sculptor and illustrator. Spending that so many years, a couple decades, doing that professionally, Zbrush breathed new life into my art and the interest in what I did, just as a new fantastic tool that opened up a whole new ways of doing stuff. So this is a personal piece that the intention was to make him imposing, maybe even intimidating, but I wanted you to be able to look into his eyes and still see that there's an individual there, and it be more than just a big, scary monster. This was actually for the movie Tomorrowland. At the top of the Eiffel Tower, there is a wax figure of Eiffel and Edison together. And in an earlier version of the script, when the characters get to the top of the Eiffel Tower, it's protected by these wax mannequins that turn out to be clockwork automatons. So this is a version of him where they get their wax faces melted off by lasers.
Do you mind if I ask a question?
Go for it.
When you approach something like this, where you've got a framework underneath and an organic thing on top, do you generally start with the framework first or the outer surface first?
I'll start with the outer surface first because I want everything to be structurally within that surface. So, yeah, I started with the Eiffel likeness first on this guy. This is a prop I did for SpongeBob SquarePants. They actually grew this full scale and mechanized it. It's a creepy rotted guy with some exploration. This is a NASA military spacesuit.
And just to go back to that last one,
Sure.
I hope you don't mind me jumping in.
No,
Just
of
wanna
course.
talk a little bit about the process. Tully's got a great mind for both creatures and hard surface, and working with him now about 2 years, I think.
Yeah.
I've watched him be able to just do day-to-day churning out the most organic, strange things you've ever seen, and then all of a sudden be building very mundane things to really cool weapons to all sorts of stuff. And as far as I know, it's primarily all in ZBrush.
Yes. Yeah. ZBrush is my main tool now. I love it. It's, especially coming from, say a creature shop where a design maquette would take anywhere from 3 weeks to a month and a half to go from welding or building an armature, doing a clay sculpt on top of that armature, molding that, casting that, painting that, would take a bunch of people and a really long time. With tools like ZBrush now, it lets an individual do that same process in a fraction of the amount of time and still have a very presentable end result. So, yeah, it is. This is fictional sort of dinosaur-type creatures. A couple versions of him. This was an interesting process. This was for Jungle Book. I was in the art department doing the animal characters for that, and these were basically design maquettes that we would hand off to MPC for them to do their magic. But we had to instill the character and show that these animals can portray emotion and do volume, because show fur volume, because then they were going to sort of deconstruct it and then do real hair sim and all that on their production models. So these were very basic, rough, almost toy-like design sculptures that we then did paint-overs and then handed off to MPC for them to work their magic. For these, I started similar to, almost, I guess, in reverse of the Clockwork Robot. I started with a scan of a real wolf skull, because I knew we wanted to be, making emotion and humanizing these things. So I wanted to know, even if we decided to break and move stuff around, I wanted to know where we're breaking reality away from a natural structure, which we didn't end up doing that much. It was mostly with mouth and eyes, but the underlying structure stayed pretty true.
I don't know if this is true or not, but I like to think when I'm designing the characters, like always thinking of that, like always thinking of how will this move, what are the problems production's going to have as you're designing these things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's even with fictitious characters, it's thinking about its fictitious anatomy and how it functions is going to add believability and help you sell that idea. So there's Mama, there's Papa, there's Baby, and there's Muddy Baby. This was interesting. This was Ka, the snake that tries to eat Mowgli. And the challenge with her was expressions on something that still looks like a real snake. Because there's not a whole lot of human expression cues on a real snake's face. So did a couple different tests of the expression. Again, using scans of real skulls. I actually didn't realize that they had all these crazy amount of teeth inside, because it's usually covered up by all their gums and stuff. But I thought it would be a cool visual, even though this doesn't really happen. If right before she tries to eat him, that she exposes all those rows and rows of teeth. And they actually do it for a second in the film. They cut away really quick, but it's there. So is this a play here? Yeah, there we go. So here's playing with mouth movement. I do, these are all ZBrush animations done with morph targets. I do this a lot. This is in no way for performance. It's all completely structural exploration, but I find it extremely useful. This is sort of fun as a test for its hypnotic eye. I had made this. This is all done in ZBrush with a little bit of comp in After Effects. But basically what I did was make a curve brush and live capture that curve brush for that pattern. This is early ghosts for the last Ghostbusters. And the original ideas for this one was the ghosts were otherworldly. They weren't necessarily from people. So we're trying to come up with something alien and different. Now that's shifted over the course of production into what they ended up with. But I sort of liked the first versions where they started off. Trying to do an homage to the librarian ghost reveal. So a lot of my designs had stuff opening up and exploding. Gangster ghost, another ghost, sort of demon guy. Here's another version where wanted the stuff around his mouth to feel like teeth, but actually open up like fingers, and then really open up crazy. This was written out of the script, but at the end of this early script, they get a super high-tech vehicle given to them by the government. And I wanted to include this because this is another example of how I use the animation timeline and morphs and stuff in ZBrush to do structural animation. So here's their crazy high-tech RV. Okay, you got your basic door, and that's how you get in and out. That's not too exciting. In the back, they get all their proton packs. Sides open up, get to drop out their ghost busting.
And this was all in ZBrush?
This is all ZBrush.
Amazing.
Got a top turret. And then the final one, you got your super race car. That's fun. Okay, so
Cool.
you want to go through
Sure,
your
yeah, yeah.
personal stuff?
So as I go opening the folders, I'll also mention Tully and I now have been at Marvel for about 2 years, just under. And we, a lot of what we've worked on, we cannot show. So it's kind of weird. Tonight we're going to be showing, or today, this morning, we're going to be showing a lot of stuff from Guardians of the Galaxy. But we've been working, that wasn't even our first show, I believe. We both were hired on Thor.
We've worked on 5 shows there right now, 6. Guardians of the Galaxy is the stuff that we can show you right now.
The weird
Everything
thing
else,
is,
we cannot.
and the weird thing with Guardians is it wasn't the first one we worked on either. So we're going to be showing you some of the stuff we worked on for that film, but it's actually some of the stuff that was toward the end or revised from a pretty late date.
We were brought in about 2 years ago specifically to work on Thor Ragnarok. Most of the Guardians stuff was underway or finished already while we were working on Thor Ragnarok. This is part of the fun of working at Marvel is you jump around on all these different projects that they're working on. They came up with the idea for all of those multiple end tag credits on the Guardians, and they said, oh, we need some, so we ended up designing some of those post tag.
I don't know about you, I was a huge Guardians fan. It was like one of my favorite Marvel movies, so when I got hired there, I was hoping, I wonder if we'll be working on that. And like, no, that's way done. Aww. And then now to come back around and be the first official project revealed was pretty exciting.
Yeah.
So anyway, a little bit about myself. Been working in the industry for a while myself too. I started off in cinematics and video games and moved over to Legacy Effects for about 6 years. Worked there doing everything from maquettes and makeup designs and really started as a modeler. And actually the first show I was hired on was Iron Man 2. So kind of funny to go full circle. That's where I met Ryan, who was going to be here tonight but was not able to attend today, who's the head of visual development there. So I met him many years before, so full circle coming back. But at Legacy, I got to do a lot of really fun, exciting things, and as Tully was talking about earlier, actually get hands-on experience. Sometimes just doing 3D prints, sometimes actually going on set, which really changed how I thought about the software, which is ZBrush. So early on, I pretty much did all the renders in ZBrush. This is way before Keyshot was really a thing. This was from Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, not the newest one. After I left Legacy, I did a few things. I'll show you a couple of the things that I worked on from them. Some of this, you may, if you guys have seen my Instagram or anything, I posted a few of these images up, but there's a few I've not shown before. But this was for Spectral. And speaking of going back to another project, I was at Legacy when they were working on Spectral, and it kind of went away and it never got released, and I didn't work on it at the time. And after I had left, I got contacted by the visual effects supervisor to do some more development on it, to figure out, to add, at the time they had these really cool ghost designs, but they were kind of just scary, and they wanted it to have moments where you could see some soul, as well as scary. So I got to work directly with the director and come up with a bunch of really fun ideas. So it was a really fun project to be leaving Legacy kind of nervous about what I was going to do, and suddenly, hey, you're going to make some spooky ghosts. It's like, all right. So these were some of the designs that were meant to show that just for a moment you would see some humanity within there, but they were never clear. So some of this was just trying to illustrate the fact that you would just have glimpses and see it all in motion and movement, never actually seeing anything too clear, unless you're like freeze-framed.
How are you achieving that? Are you taking multiple renders of your
so
piece and then comping those together?
These guys, I did a lot of 2D, I'll be honest. The only real 3D I did on these was using some primitive skeletons, just so I didn't have to go in there and paint bones all the time, and I could get some more interesting angles and stuff. And then I just painted over pretty heavily on this. So I had a very rough model of a body, but at the end it pretty much became just painted over. One of the differences, I think, with you and I is I tend to be very lazy with my 3D and jump into Photoshop quicker and totally will resolve things down to a very much tighter level a lot of times, early on.
Yeah, I'm a victim of my, my traditional sculpting background.
And without saying any projects or anything, but that has been a huge benefit when something is loved and suddenly they want to have it made because the answers are all there.
I think that's been a huge asset in both our careers, is coming from a place where we're familiar with fabrication and construction and bringing, making stuff for real. Having that in the back of your head, even if it's going to be a completely digital character and never fabricated, always gives it that much more believability.
Yeah, it's easy to come up with wild. No, it's not easy to come up with wild ideas. It's very difficult to come up with cool ideas. But sometimes ideas will be generated that are really difficult to do. And in fact, this project is a pretty good example of that, where it's like, yeah, I can paint this stuff, but some poor particle guy and some visual effects artist is going to have to figure out, how do I do that? Yeah. And I had a little experience with that, so I had some ideas, but luckily they have, there's wizards out there who can come up with this stuff and achieve much cooler results than I could imagine. So early on, the first passes I did, very Jacob's Ladder stuff, was like exploding out bodies, and
that's great.
Really very horror show. And that was determined after the first couple days that this was not going to be the route to take on it. It was kind of, once again, just going into scary as opposed to having some personality. So trying to dial it back a little bit. Starting to see, ooh, somebody just found a chest. That'd be cool. We should hide like chests throughout the place in the dark. So this was the next one. The next pass I did after the notes came in to say they need to have soul. No pun intended. Pun was intended.
It was intended.
So they had seen a lot of males, so I decided to do some female designs to kind of show maybe how those could look. Do they have hair? Do they not have hair? Is it done through smoke or wisp? How do they look when they move? The idea started to come into like soap bubbles and tattered cloth and burning embers almost. Another thing of them walking and falling apart. They had determined a really great, through a maquette actually, and some beautiful artwork, a kind of a similar kind of walking thing, but it's more of an écorché. So this was me kind of, standing on the shoulders of giants and coming up with something that maybe had a little bit more humanity to it, but still had that amazing feel that they had on the previous one. I like the idea that maybe the faces never quite fused together, but I don't think that was ever really liked. So the next project I'll be showing is some Jurassic World stuff. A lot of this I have never shown before. I've seen a lot of things online now, so There's some great artists out there. This was all done while I was at Legacy. So the previous one was freelance. This was while I was still there. I'm a huge dinosaur fan, so this was kind of a dream come true project for me. So this was the approved Pteranodon design, head study, and there was the body as it sits on the ground. While working on this, I also, it's not always really like pretty renders and stuff. Sometimes, that's what you see online. You see everybody has their cool rendered out color with mist and everything obscuring all these things. But a lot of times, especially for us, I think working in 3D, showing the model and showing how it looks from different angles can be what I call the clinical stages. You sell them on the idea, and then you go back and start showing them where things could fall apart. This one was a crest study for how big that crest could be.
I find the turnarounds and more views are required for stuff that is the more alien, the more strange, the stuff that's less bipedal, less human-like, usually takes a lot more explanation to show people what's going on.
Speaking of which, I just realized I wasn't loading those. So yeah, as he was saying, even though we've all seen the ideas of pteranodons, it was to show them, well, what does that really look like? The model, I showed it with some color on it, just to kind of get the idea sold. And the difference between doing something that's super clinical versus something with a little bit of a pose on it can actually really help sell the character. If you just have this stiff character, a lot of times people will look at that and go, I don't like it, and I don't know why. And usually it's because it looks like a dead thing.
We'll show each other internally T-pose stuff, but for presentation, for
when it goes
anything that goes to client has to be posed.
I've very rarely been able to show sketches to clients, like actual just
Not
pencil
anymore.
drawings, but nowadays it's like they'll ask for it sometimes and you'll show it and they'll be like, yeah, but what does it look like? What is this? And you go, I don't know how to express without going in and fully realizing it. And that's usually what people seem to want to see these days. While I was at Legacy, one of the really exciting things there was that they do full 3D printing and fabrication and all that, so you actually got to see this stuff done. I saw some of these images online recently of this thing fully painted, but I'll just show them. This was based on the sculpt I did. This is a 3D print. So here was some early designs for the mutant dinosaur. I loved the idea of it being like this tiger striped thing. I just hadn't seen something like that before. And for a while, this one was kind of in the lead. I even saw ILM did some keyframes and stuff that were released like right around the movie that had this dinosaur plugged in there, which was kind of cool. The idea being like these would be chromatophores so you could blend into environments and things. I did some studies on that, but I won't be showing them because they were very rough. And then another take on that critter. This one much more in the scary things are not quite right with it zone. I think the only thing that may have lasted of my involvement was some of the little proto-quills that were on these things. But I actually loved what they ended up with. I thought it was a really spooky, crazy-looking monster.
It's beautiful.
Again, back to the clinical stuff. So though I liked the idea of this yellow tiger stripe thing, it's kind of clear it wasn't going. So show some simple versions of color passes. And on this show, I did this a lot. On a few other shows I've worked on, this has been a very useful way of showing color once the model is, or the design is kind of starting to go a good direction. Let's see if I have another movie before we go. Nope. Okay, cool. There is the model itself in a pose, just to kind of show what was going on with it. And some early designs on the Dimorphodons, which were really fun. They're a very almost comical, almost scary-looking dinosaur with their crazy gangly teeth. I really had fun on this one. They didn't end up going with this design. They did a different take on it.
And this is all based off of fossil records, right?
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah.
The Jurassic Park dinos, if you guys have studied like paleontology and stuff, you'll see that there's a kind of a difference between what a Jurassic Park dinosaur is and what maybe the most accurate one is, but they're not really dinosaurs, right? They're fused with different things. So you have a little bit of creative license to make something, but at the same time, yes, I always would I'd go to like skeletal record sites and try to keep the bones in mind as I was working on this stuff. There is a lot of interpretation with dinosaurs, which is fun too. One of the interesting things on these and the pteranodons was figuring out the cord shape where the wing connects. What would really work? If you look at like bats, right, it would connect down to the legs. But is that what they would have? We have no idea. We really don't. It's just, at this point, it's much smarter people than me doing scientific tests to figure out how something of that size could actually travel.
So is this your visual call then?
This was it, yeah. This was kind of the different things. I got some movie files too. So things that were important on this one was to show what does it look like on the ground. They have these fun little thumbnails that are in all the fossil records, and I really wanted to make sure we get in there. Thought that was an interesting shape. And then, also to show what it might look like, this is actually a very clinical one, just the model, but I did some that were also flying. Just to kind of show, and also how long the wings are. Sometimes, if you really look at how long they'd have to be versus when you've got swarms of them on the screen, what's going to work better. So sometimes Hollywood magic is used. Whoops. Go here. Oh, no, it is loading. So again, another study of the head shape. And if you remember the movie, they did go with more of the boxier shape. And again, this was all based on studies I'd seen online of really how do those skulls look once they're actually fully formed. So it's fun. Then there's some other ones that aren't exactly real dinosaurs. That was kind of one of the themes of the movie. These guys were not picked, but they were used in the game and the action figures by a guy named Bowden Sturba did the main design, I think, for that from Legacy. And you can see those online. They're really cool. This is one of the first shows I started using Keyshot. So these were non-ZBrush renders that took forever at the time because I was using pretty old hardware. I've since upgraded, but I just remember falling in love with like the soft shadows and all this stuff. Ooh, wow, looks like a clay sculpture. Again, studies of how the crest and the horns could look. I'll probably gotta plow through. Start running out of time. And then ZBrush turnarounds, because at the time doing turnarounds in Keyshot I just didn't know how to set them up without it going slow. I did some early work on Power Rangers, mostly helmet designs, but this is one of the takes I did on the costume. So I've done a lot of costume design work over the years, and this was a really fun one. It was coming up with a new look for these guys who are pretty iconic. I had a lot of fun on this. Actually, let me go back one. We'll go into that guy in a second. For whatever, oh, okay. Well, I mislabeled it, so we'll go back to him in a second. But I did designs on all the main Rangers' helmets. I did not do the costumes on anybody else other than that, so these were done by other people. But the helmet designs were my ideas for what they might look like. And it's a really, really fun project to work on. This was actually after I left Legacy, but I was freelancing with them and with the production designer to come up with this stuff. So then there's Alpha 5, who I had an absolute blast working on. I like goofy characters, I like funny characters. So these were a couple of the early sketches I did that were liked by the director. And I resolved this one a little further to say maybe how the eye shapes could work. They liked having some sort of eye you could recognize. I thought maybe they could grow out of the face or something. And then this was my final pass. A lot of those last ones were really, really rough models with some 2D on, a lot of 2D on top. This was my last pass of a model, but still had a lot of 2D on top. And in the final film, he's got a lot of the vibe from this one, so it's kind of cool to see. And I did some early pitch work on Kong, too. These were a couple images from that. We should get into the actual Marvel stuff now. But just some studies of what the face could look like, trying to harken back to the original design a little bit.
That's
What
cool.
was in there? This was for a pitch that didn't go anywhere. They're mermaids. I did about 20 of these, so I'm only going to show 2 of them. But that's one thing, versions. Yes. And I had lionfish and this and that, and all sorts of patterns on these.
Yeah.
So I think that's that for that, and I think we could go into let it totally take over now. And
While you're doing that, can I ask a quick question here from online?
Sure.
So when you do your poses, is that the last step you do after finalizing a T-pose, or is it more of a back and forth process with players for you guys?
For me, it's one of the last steps, yeah.
Same. I see people do stuff in pose, and I love it. I've done it a few times. It is fun. It takes me a lot longer to resolve stuff, and then the end result becomes a lot less useful for the many, many things I might use that file for. So I'll let
Go ahead.
no, this is your guy. So I'll let you take it
Okay.
away.
So again, these were the end credit guardians that they asked us to design, and the way Marvel approaches character design is they show us the version from the comic that is the closest that they want to see, that they want it derived from, because over the years there's a whole bunch of different versions. And then they'll sit anywhere from 3 to 6 artists on the same character to work on simultaneously, and all their individual takes on that. But as a presentation, you have tons and tons of options to choose from.
And one of the interesting things with this guy was that a lot of work had already been done on him. He was actually already a visual effect in the film, and he looked pretty similar to what you see here. I believe it was Rodney Fuentebella's design that was originally going through, and you can see it in the Guardians art book. It's a really great design. But because of the very kind of simplistic nature of the face of the comic book, they had problems with the animation. And so that's when we actually jumped back onto it, was trying to figure out how do you make a Crystal Man read well on screen while he's moving around.
Yeah, it's inherently challenging too when you have anything transparent, because your surface goes away. So trying to get character and show what's going on there with something that's inherently transparent is very difficult. Never mind having that move and feel like it's natural and not squishy.
Yeah. So these are yours. I'll let you do yours, and then I'll go through mine.
So these are me. So because of our similar backgrounds, me and Ian usually get put on the same characters. So I did versions of this. Ian did versions of this. They eventually chose one of Ian's version, which is fantastic.
The weird thing is I think it was 2, but then they ended up with like a fusion.
Yeah, a little mix and match going on.
I always like that.
So just did a little bit of. So this is a plate that they gave us that I comped in over just so we get a feel with it in situation.
It can be really important when you're working on these characters to show them in context. It's great to have one just standing on a black background or a smoky room, but
And as this was post, we had material to fit it into.
So I love this one. We both got a chance to do the weird creature versions. And they were like, well, let's just see what it looks like.
Yeah.
Like, oh, yes, let's see what it looks like.
Yeah, like to give them a range of relatively calm to see how far you can push it and get away with. Also, this is Kruger, right? Kruger is an alien that eventually takes the place of Doctor Strange, or
I can't remember if he becomes a Sorcerer Supreme in the comics or if he works with him.
basically.
I think he's set way in the future, so I think he takes the place.
Right. So he's an alien that uses magic, and does not talk. So he's super tiny image. Thank you. But our marching orders from James was I want him weird, I want him alien, and I want him creepy. So this is my first take on him. Weird, alien, and creepy. And we've both sort of learned this at Marvel. There's a Marvel window of design, and we tend to go too alien, too creepy for them, and that's what this was for them. They said, yeah, a little too gross for us.
I think since we both have a lot of background in practical effects and horror and things like that, we're like, you want something creepy? Let's do something really nasty. They're like, no, we're going to show kids this.
Yeah, a little too gooey. So
We've each had those notes a few times.
quite a few times. So second take on him was trying to evoke more of the Doctor Strange aspect of him, and I was trying to do the strange high collar and cape a little bit, but in a biological way, with some membrane. And
one thing I've noted on this guy, and I don't even know if you know this, they really love the costume idea on here. So the final costume that I did is actually very influenced by some of your shapes that are happening right here.
there's so much. First of all, everybody that we work with is just amazingly talented, constantly blown away, and there's so many hundreds of amazing designs that are left on the cutting room floor for whatever reason, pure opinion. But a lot of times they do mix and match with stuff that they and we influence each
Jared
other.
Morantz and Constantine Serkis, is that how you say his last name? I hope I didn't butcher it. Did some beautiful work on this character too that they have on their websites, which is really worth checking out. Just all their stuff. But.
So another turnaround.
While that's turning, I got a question right here on the floor. Over here, way over in the middle. There you go.
I have a question. Something that you should prior with the car, with this car, but in animation, I was wondering if you did also more target.
Yeah, all morph targets. It's all quick and dirty morph targets. It's not necessarily as elegant as other animation projects out there, but it's so simple and quick to establish for me that I love it. It's
You're using it with timeline, right?
yeah,
Layers and timeline.
layers and timelines.
So here's the thing, like, I've been using ZBrush, I think since version 1.4 or something. Like, I've been using this program for a long time, and when they introduced the animation, I went, that's neat, and I tried using it and said, oh, I can't see any use for this. It seems too complicated. Then working with Tully, he showed me how to use it, and it's been used on almost every show now. Like, it's really powerful.
It really is. It's a pretty amazing tool.
Yeah.
And I'm glad it's still there. Every release, I'm worried. No, don't get it, because I don't hear a lot of people that use it. But
I feel you should do like a master class on using it, because he had to give me a crash course on it for a complicated character, and
but it only takes about 5 minutes because it's that easy to use. So.
took me a whole day.
So this is Mainframe. It's a computer head, brain, and that's what James liked about it, is that it was sort of self-contained, and the idea that he had is it sits on a table by itself, and then people carry it into and plug into larger things, vehicles or a robot body or whatever. And so this was some early takes on just the head. So this was all the Guardian stuff has that sci-fi retro vibe too that it was really shooting for. So it sort of has an Art Deco feel to it, and meant to locomote itself around with its little legs. This is an idea. Now, this wasn't shown in the film, but as sort of proof of concept, I wanted to show it plugged into something larger. So in this case, a big stomping robot body.
There's another question right here on the floor, over here at the back door.
Sure. Go ahead.
When you talk about the dinosaur, you're talking about how it was used upstream for toys and other purposes. When you guys model, particularly the Marvel side, is there any initiative brought to you to say, like, well, let's think about how these assets can be repurposed for video games, for collectibles, for toys, or does that stuff just get sold later as a separate asset?
I personally have never, while I've been there, had someone say, like, don't do that because we're going to make a toy based on it, or like, do this because we want to make a toy based on it. I think, it's the easy kind of thought about Hollywood, right, ever since Star Wars. It's like, they're going to make, all they make these movies for is to make toys. And, there might be some truth to that, but one of the things cool about Marvel is the love of the source material.
Yeah.
And I'm a huge comic fan, so I really admire the fact that they're more interested in plumbing the depths of some of the history of the comics, as opposed to just worrying about, like, well, we have to make alternate suits because that way we can make a bunch of action figures. So personally, no, I haven't really had that as a mandate of like change this because it'll be hard to make a toy.
Yeah, had in terms of design in the visual development department, that's never been expressed to me. It's always stories first, character first. Down the line, when it's going through, corporate approvals and stuff, that might be considered, but that's elsewhere. We're not even thinking about that. So all our marching orders are usually coming from the directors and producers, pertaining to the script.
It's a very creative environment, like Tully was mentioning before. The people who work there, and not just in the Viz Dev department, it's just an amazing group of people. Like, I can mostly speak for the Viz Dev department, but we have 2D artists, you have 3D artists, you have hybrid guys, you have guys who do some visual effects. You've got all sorts of different paths that lead to this place, and they embrace it. If you have the time, like they'll let people do portrait paintings or to do animations to figure out how something's going to work, or really explore the characters in a way that is refreshing and really artist friendly, I would say.
Yeah, very much so. All our immediate supervisors, Andy Park and Ryan Meinerding, are amazing artists in their own right, and to have that is such a privilege. I mean, it's really been wonderful.
The notes you get from them aren't just like, I don't like it. It's usually, this is interesting. What if we tried this and this to make the pose more dynamic? Or what if we tried to...
It's like going to school every day.
It really is. Yeah. And that goes for everybody there. It's one of the things that I really love about the place, and Tully in particular, there's a sharing of knowledge that happens there that is like, we're excited about the software. Ryan, in particular, has phenomenal 2D skills, right? Like, you can look at his stuff and just see that he's one of the great working painters. Then, he also has a 3D background. Then he gets into ZBrush. And all of a sudden, the stuff he's doing in there is just like, wow.
He's crazy good at everything. It's disgusting.
Incredible work. But he still will share with you his
Absolutely,
approach.
yeah, it's really fantastic.
It's really great.
Okay, so here's another one of those structural animations.
And was this close to the final look?
This is close to the final look, and it's just sitting on there, but I wanted it to be able to articulate and look at people. And then this is the cage that connects to it that is the interface for it to connect to the larger pieces.
Hey, Ian, question from online about your Power Ranger suits.
Oh, yeah.
Did you use Z-Modeler or just extrude functions to make all those?
A little bit of everything. Z-Modeler is actually, that was one of the first shows I really used Z-Modeler on, and the topology brush. Love the topology brush.
Okay.
Because of the nature of that character, it was those costumes, like coming up with a basic form and then splitting things off and interweaving pieces and all of that. Those tools were indispensable. It was so great. I did do some of those ones I did some paint over work on, but toward the end of the helmets, like that was, I'd say 95% of what was in ZBrush. It was what I was just rendering out a keyshot. And it was like, great, perfect, just because I could do it all with the Z-Modeler brush.
Okay, we'll take a question from the floor here, Tully, while you're doing that.
How come it's not coming up? There we go.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're doing, throughout your career, you talked about kind of like bringing the soul from the 2D image to 3D presentation. I was just curious, like, working with sort of like older drawings and designs, what are some of the things you guys think about as you translate the soul of that design to more of a modern local design?
It's a good question. It's different for every character. So sometimes they'll really like love a certain image, and sometimes they'll say there's elements of this. And especially the first round, you're very open to exploration. You get to kind of run a bigger gamut. After that, they really hone in on like how much of the source material, how much of the movies need, and where those two things collide is usually where the end design, I think.
Right.
ends.
It's very dependent on the character too. I mean, the major characters are going to be under more scrutiny and probably going to feel more like it is in the comic book. Especially these ones are sort of lesser known, more side characters. We usually have a little more leeway, and they're more comfortable with exploration for those kind of things.
What was cool though is that James actually like would pick out not just like the coolest image. He would actually find like the one that I think spoke to him the most. So a lot of times it was some of the more retro stuff.
Yeah.
Which I thought was kind of refreshing. You know, a lot of times you work on projects and they're looking for, well, this is cool and this is hardcore and this feels gritty and grounded. Whereas, like on this show, sometimes it was like, but this is more fun. This is more interesting. Let's try to bring that back in.
Yeah, it comes down to character-based,
In fact, on
story-based.
Kruger, you guys got to work, and I'll get into him in a second, but you guys got to work on him a little before I did, where it was the really creepy phase. And it actually came back to that first image he showed from the comic, where he's like, there's something about this I want to try to bring back into it.
Yeah.
So they let us explore, and sometimes they realize, like, well, the soul of the character actually is the quirkiness, or maybe it is the, who knows, you know, every character is different, but.
Yeah, you have so many decades of comics too, so especially with some of the Guardians ones, you can see their older style art and older style design. So it's fun jumping off from that stuff too, because it's a different take on things.
I have I think you do too, kind of a little bit of a love of the older stuff. I think there's something really pure about it. To see, before there was a lot of committee involved, sometimes you get to see like, oh wow, they just kind of ran with this idea.
Yeah.
So to take that and try to update it a little bit, or just reimagine it completely sometimes. But that's usually one of the more fun aspects of this.
Yeah.
So this is an example of, this is one of my first passes on this character. The first thought was that instead of it just being smooth crystal, to do a lot of craggly breaks and maybe different types of crystal to show areas of motion. So I did this one in kind of a studio environment, and then when I brought him into the scene, you can see just how much it changes, right? Especially when there's blue with a crystal thing, it just a lot of blue is pulled into it. That's how rough the model was. I wanted a lot of interplay of refraction and strangeness, so sometimes they're tight and sometimes they're really, really loose. This one was just kind of fun to play with. I used the array mesh and all sorts of things to try to get strange effects to happen. And this was the opposite take. This was taking more of what the comic book version was, but like someone dropped them, and trying to make all the facial expressions were more like cracked out of that, but with big areas of rest as well. And I think there was areas on this one that they kind of thought worked, but they liked the spikiness that a lot of us were doing. So, and there's that model. So this was then the next pass of taking this and adding in the fractures and the fractals and all sorts of things to him. And again, like we kept comping them into two scenes, and this was important to show what he really looks like, and this was important to show kind of where he might sit in the scene. And there's that model.
I like that guy.
Yeah, I like that weird eraser head or something. Same idea here, though, is like to take, like, if it was just a crystal and just two shattered bits happen for the eyes and a shattered split for the mouth. Because early on, they weren't sure if maybe they needed to go really alien with him to make him work. You guys probably are all familiar with the Uncanny Valley. The closer you get to human, the more you go, ugh. So sometimes we'll explore that, especially with the alien characters, is like, how much do you want it to be real and how much do you want it to be fantastic? Another weird one. A lot of fun, though, and I like the idea of the eyes being these strange, different form of like quartz or something on the inside. And speaking of eyes, we'll get there in a sec, I guess.
So this was Ian's alien-looking one too.
Yep.
So that's our range too. Now there's a larger range that you could go to, but after being there a little while, you try to anticipate that strike zone. Yeah. What's going to be too much for them? What's going to be too less? So.
Especially when they provide this on set and say, we're going to replace this section.
Yeah.
So that for me, that limits you. Like, I don't like to just put a big forehead appliance on something and say, like, it's an alien. If they're going to look really weird, like, they're probably going to have a weird body too, right? So when you know that you're going to have something very bipedal, then you know, okay, got to keep within that zone that feels like there'd be a reason for it to have normal arms.
Still function on the human body, huh?
So there's the model shot for that one. So after I did a bunch of passes on those, they picked a few they liked, and they wanted to see some more fragmentation. So this is a range. They picked that eraser head guy, and this was a lot of area of rest, pardon me, on top of a really just fractured thing, and to show the two ideas. My thought was that with motion, you're going to want to have a lot of these kind of scaly breakup, because those things can crumble away or ride on top of each other, and it feels believable for movement.
It's the challenge with like hard rock, crystal, any kind of thing.
Yeah.
Even suits, whatever. As soon as that kind of stuff, as soon as you see that bend, it ruins the illusion. So usually requests like this are coming down from VFX soups and whatever, saying I need to be able to move this and not make it squishy.
Yeah, if it's just a smooth face moving around, it really feels like, is he water? Like, what's happening here?
Yeah.
So the other thought was to use like shards or something, so those plates would ride over the little pieces. In the end, I think they kind of ended up somewhere in those zones. And there's the model shot for that one. Weird, fuzzy-looking guy. And some weird goggles. At one point, they weren't sure if maybe that would make him read a little easier, if they had something really distinct to pop off of the blue face there. And this is toward the end of the design passes that I was doing. Just so you know, like, this is what the VizDev department does. It then goes up the chain to the visual effects houses, and they do a lot of work after the fact to make it work in scene. One of the refreshing things at Marvel, as you can see, they do tend to stick pretty close to what we provide a lot of times, which is really fun to see, but sometimes it can be completely different, and that's fun to see too.
Yeah.
So here's that guy. Little turntable. That's a ZBrush model turntable I did of him. You can see I get very lazy on stuff, so if I know I'm not going to show the back for a long time, I will not touch the back. So one of the things I did on this guy, which was completely beyond what was required, I wanted to figure out how would you make the eyes like dilate, and I had this idea for these weird little crystal pieces that would actually like ride over themselves on multiple levels. So you could actually get hard surface that gave the illusion of dilation. You never get close enough for this guy to ever see any of that stuff, but I thought the idea would be kind of fun just to show. There's a few shots where he's up close, but again, he's so shiny it's hard to see anything.
I never saw that one.
There's the closer up version of
That's
that,
cool.
which I was told looked like something else, so I had to do the other angle. So this is one of the final designs I did. This was one of the approved ones I got finished that was very fragmented, kind of based on what you'd already seen on some of the other stuff, but blending in. So a lot of this was like a lot of Photoshop on top to like do multiple renders, put them together to find, just getting one render out of Keyshot for this was really, really hard for me. I don't know if you had that difficulty. And here's a turntable, which will kind of explain why. Because they bloom out so much. So I knew that smarter people and more talented people than me were going to have to go in and really define areas to recognize on them. So I wanted to do the paint over as well. So once they got into something with proper UVs, they could do more interesting stuff with it. But that's a Keyshot render. And then this was the other design that was in the 2-pack of approvals, which was a similar design, but with more of the areas of rest, fragmented parts, all of that. And there's the turntable for him. So you can see that by this point, I say this and I'm hoping I'm right, I started to resolve the back a little bit more. Sometimes I don't do that. This is the final shot in the film. So you can see he's changed a bit, but a lot of the elements that we did kind of were brought into the final shot. Looked great in the movie, really tough thing to sell. And there he is. And look at just the difference in the lighting quality, right? Like, completely different character almost. Crystal's very, very difficult. So that is Martin X. And now for Kruger. Whoops. So this was the image. So I was on other stuff for a while they were working on the first pass of him. And then my schedule opened up, so I got to jump on him too. And this image had come back down the pipe saying, like, there's something about this one, the weird worm body and the ears and everything that we really want to try to harken back to a little bit more. So some of my first passes here. This is one of the few ones I actually had saved a lot of versions of, so I could show you kind of the creation of them. Z-spheres. don't use them all the time. A lot of times I'm just doing Dynamesh these days, but sometimes they are still great. I don't know about yourself, but I still really love them. They seem to not get as much love these days, but never get rid of them. We love them. And so this was my first pass sculpt of this guy. I'll show you some final renders of him too. But this is just poly paint on top. And these are some model shots of the costume. I can zoom in a little bit. All similar ideas. This was the first, trying to make something that was kind of mystical, alien, but in the end they decided they wanted to go more Ravager with it, and I'll show you what that looks like.
Yeah, a little more sci-fi, right?
Yeah. So this is a shot of him in pose, and same character, but just in a completely different pose, to give a different idea. This was another take on that body. You can see I did very, very little there, because when I show you the renders, I really just focus on this zone. We knew he had a worm body, so I knew this was not important to spend a lot of time on at that point. And this is a ZBrush render of his face with poly paint on it, and of the face in pose. So these two images, I guess, these two models, I'll show you the final images in a second, were the ones that they gravitated toward, and they wanted to see some fusions of these two ideas. So the other one had that weird split in the face. In my head, I was thinking maybe it opened up to reveal something terrifying, but I never expressed that.
Didn't tell them that.
And there's the other one close up to
cool.
the face. So they liked these two, and I'll show you they never saw these images, never really seen by anybody except for the internal team. And this is the final costume. So let me just go to here. We'll go back to that. I'll keep going. Why not? Sorry. Yeah, so there's the final costume and final face sculpt that I did on him. Big question was how big those eyes were going to be, and I did sheets and sheets of this big, little, tiny, angled, and it's interesting to try to figure out what made him work and be expressive on screen for something that has no mouth. And there's the final sculpt I did of him.
Yeah, it's funny. Sometimes there's characters that hit quick, and they say, "Yeah, that's it.
Yep.
That's what we like." And sometimes you sort of have to spiral in on it, and then the closer that you get, it gets more specific and more specific. So you end up with, 800 iterations of tiny specifics and
Freckle patterns and things like that.
Yeah.
As silly as that sounds, sometimes it can be that. But then other characters you'll do that you think are like, this is going to be a tough one, and they're like, no, they're already making it. Really? Here's this a model shot. Poly paint in ZBrush. Okay, so these are the images that we actually showed. So that was that spookier version based on the first image you sent over. I thought weird rags and stuff like that, a bit much. And this was the same design but with a different costume, different kind of take. But they liked something about these images. And in fact, if you look at the final ones when I bring them up, a lot of elements of this actually remained, including the poly paint, because I actually did UVs on this character, so I could do color passes pretty quickly in Photoshop. And then this one, they liked the feel of it, the overall vibe, the fingers and stuff like that. They thought were interesting. You can see I got embarrassed by my bad sculpting down there, so I painted it out. And this is fairly close to final design of my pass on him. At this point, he still had the neck membrane connected into his body, which was my thought of like the Doctor Strange collar callback. But in the end, they wanted to go more toward what the comic showed.
the big fin
The
fish
big,
ears.
the big fish ears, yeah. Which were pretty cute. I like them. But this, there's some Photoshop work on top of this, but a lot of this was keyshot renders and then just going in and painting fixing up areas and popping out details and things.
So one of the reasons that I think they chose this version is because he captured that awkwardness of the original design, that worm body running right up to anatomy. But the anatomy that it resolves itself in is completely believable. He's got so much structure there that it works. So
I didn't want to make it just there were versions where it was literally just like a human arm on top of a human chest that then turned into a worm on the bottom. But trying to figure out a way to make these work, which actually leads right into the next images. They weren't quite sure. They thought maybe it should go even more alien, more shell-like. So maybe it'd be a lot of like stacking plates and stuff like that on top of things. Really weird body type, right? So it's really alien. And this was the range. So we do these a lot of times to be like, and this was the more simplified one, which is the one they picked.
And a lot of times you'll do these intense ones knowing that it's probably not going to get picked,
Yeah.
but you're showing them that range. You're giving them, a gauge to fall in between.
The worst thing you can do is say like, okay, we've got this idea. We like kind of what you're doing there, but we really want to explore it and be like, okay, cool. Well, what if I just kind of do this to it? And they're like, that's the same
It's almost
thing.
important to show them what they don't want
Yeah.
to.
You need to take it on another level
Yeah.
to show them like, oh wow, that's cool. So this was not the final, but this was a very close to the final design that I did for the costume, and these were some options. Early on, they really liked what Tully had done with those bars going up above. So I took that and some other ideas and started coming up with the Ravager version of that, right? The Ravagers have a lot of found leathers and metals and things like that, and one of the things we wanted to bring into him was to have, without, you're only going to see him for a second, but give the idea that maybe there's some mysticism going on there. And when we get to the final design, you'll see I added little trinkets and gems and things around. Again, getting back into that, this was some more costume options. Really, just a new emblem on there. They didn't like this as a big gem. It got a little too, the note you get a lot is a little too Iron Man. You don't want to have a big glowing thing in the center.
We're constantly coming up against Marvel's own existing design because they have so many characters now and so many different looks. They're hypersensitive to, oh, that's too reminiscent of this. Oh, we're repeating ourselves that. It's so,
And
it's a design minefield.
yeah, and for us, coming in, and I'm a big fan of the film, so I've seen some of it, but I'm not intimately familiar with it. We're 2 years in now, we're getting more. But you hit a point where you're looking at this stuff going like, oh, I think I got something there. Like, yeah, we did designs for the Dark Elves like that.
Yeah.
Like, oh, dang. Okay, back to the drawing board.
Yeah. There's a question right down front
Sure,
here for
sure.
you.
I had a question for young people that are building their portfolios. Is it good to show a tremendous amount of variations of a character to say, here's all the things I can do? Or is it good just to show 3 or 4 versions or one version of a character design?
In a portfolio situation, I wouldn't show iterations of the same character. That's a process of art direction. I would prefer in a portfolio to see the range of the artist in terms of the different kinds of things he can do, or he or she can do.
I think one of the most successful I've seen is usually when someone will have like a hero shot and then maybe a page like this with just a bunch of versions to say like, oh yeah, these were the things that were on there. You don't need to do call outs for every single one though, right? Like,
Yeah, we're sharing our process here.
Yeah.
This is not,
this isn't what I would send out to
Yeah.
potential clients or on my
Yeah.
website. I would just pick the ones that I thought were like, this shows something unique about this project
Mm-hmm.
that shows my skill set or what I feel I contributed in some way. So yeah, gem designs.
So, but that leads into another question actually
Sure.
online. That's perfect. So, what skills are needed to work at a place like Marvel? What is Marvel looking for?
Passion.
Comic book lover number 1.
You'd be surprised. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I think love of the source is important. I think, but when it comes to skill set, it's amazing there. Like, there's not one skill set I would say is predominant. What you fielded from there, but
yeah, I mean, yeah, there's no one type of skill set that they go for in terms of what tools people use, but we are extremely character focused. So we do get tasked with sometimes vehicles, sometimes environments, sometimes props, but the majority of our load is all creature oriented. Yeah. So
we, the Viz Dev department at Marvel is fairly unique, I think. And I can speak to it to a level, but there's much more involved people who I think could tell you a lot more about it. But we we are kind of the front line in a lot of ways. Like, we are involved in a project oftentimes before there's a director, oftentimes before the script is finalized. So we will be tasked with coming up with keyframes for just potential ideas, or of characters that maybe we want to see this, or maybe we want to see that. It's never, it's never one thing or another there.
Yeah, the way they use the department is unique. For a number of months, me and Ian were tasked on just generating ideas and artwork for something that didn't have a script, didn't have actors, didn't have we knew the genre and we knew some of the characters involved. We were just spitballing, and that was to generate imagery for them to start writing. So, really fantastic opportunity.
Tully's been working in film longer than I have, but I haven't done a lot of keyframes. Like, really, because of my past experiences, it's been as a character designer, as a character modeler, as primarily working on character stuff. So I'm just a lot of times showing these things to say, here's what we can do. So working there has been really fun, because suddenly it's, I don't want to do just what it's going to do. Let's put them in context of something and sell an idea.
Yeah. We'll take one more here in the front.
Sure.
Hi. Zbrush has evolved the workflow so much that the expectations for turnaround times for stuff have changed. All these are different passes and sculpts, but if you're trying to work your way to what your level of quality and standard from start to finish on one character, how long is that taking? If your first pass?
It's different for everyone. I will say this about Tully: he's one of the fastest people I've ever worked with. I used to think I was quick until I worked with him, and then suddenly I'd have an idea, and I'd look over, he's like, I've got these 3 things and this animation, but I'm still going a little slow today. But but sometimes we get to spend a little more time on stuff.
Yeah.
Early passes, a lot of times you don't want to spend too much time, right? You want to get a lot of ideas done quickly. I'll let you.
Yeah, when you're hunting for a broader idea, that's when you want to maybe spend a little less time on the individual piece and try to communicate your range of ideas. The hypercritical specificity comes in the art direction process after, where they've chosen something and they're dialing it in. So,
but speed is important. Like, I can't give you a direct answer of like it takes 3 hours. But
everything's different.
Yeah,
depending on the complexity of the character,
sure.
depending on what you're trying to achieve, also depending on where the design process has been already. So we're on one that is very challenging because there's so much design has been done on this character already, and they're still looking for something new, something different, something to fit what they're shooting for. And the sheer amount of ideas that we've gone through already makes where we're at right now challenging.
Yeah, because you.
So at that point, it's not about speed anymore. You're looking for something. You're looking for
something
an
unique.
idea. Yeah.
And it's tough too on those kind of projects where, if you're the first round, right, you could turn in some rougher stuff because they've never seen anything. So sketchier things, less resolved things tend to go over better. Toward the middle to the end of stuff, if you start turning in really blobby, sketchy stuff, people are going to look at this and go like, yeah, no, I've been looking at beautiful finalized paintings or renders. I don't want to see something super rough. So at that point, suddenly you might slow down a little bit too, because you want to really resolve these things to sell that idea that you have. And Marvel's pretty great in terms of giving us a little bit of breathing room to resolve some ideas.
Yeah.
Some days it's not. Some days you're.
It's all depending on presentation schedule and meetings and stuff like that. So sometimes you have to hustle. Sometimes they'll give you a little time.
And sometimes stuff will keep coming back too. Like, this guy was approved for a while, but then suddenly it's like, maybe the eyes need to be bigger. So we do a sheet of this. You don't hear anything for a few days, and all of a sudden you start getting more and more notes on top of all the new assignments you have too. So that's where having that speed, and I think Tully would probably agree with this. I'm not one who tends to think like, because I can go X fast, I will always go that fast because you will burn out real, real fast if you're just pedal to the metal every single day.
Yeah.
So I'll try to pace myself. Once I know what the meeting schedule is, I try to figure out what I would like to have for that meeting.
Yeah.
And then give myself a little wiggle room for all the unknowns that will come up.
Obviously, speed helps if you have a lot of things on your plate that you have to get through. But at the end of the day, it's not about speed. It's about quality and idea and design.
A martial arts instructor I had used to say, speed impresses, accuracy kills.
Yeah.
Kind of fits there. So here's like the final body design of him. And I think where are we at, to 130? Is that right?
You got like 20 minutes.
Okay, cool. So I'll start going a little quicker.
Here, let me double check. Yeah, you got 20 minutes left.
Okay, great. So here's the final costume design that I turned in with the larger eyes. You can see I never actually even did it on the nude body version. But you can see revised neck. I just painted in where those things will go. A lot of times I'll do that and have to then go back to the ZBrush model and do my changes so I can hand it off to VFX. Because sometimes they won't know. They won't look at it and go like, oh, that ear's a little different, and all of a sudden it's in a shot. You go, oh, no, I painted that out. Because we are, as ZBrush concept artists, a lot of times we are tasked with providing stuff to previs, providing stuff even sometimes to visual effects so they can start with something, which is exciting, but also means you got to be aware of what you're turning in. So here's a little turntable I did of the character. You can see a little bit of the difference of the look of this versus the actual final image. That's where the level adjustments and painting on top of things kind of comes into play. But I did try to have most of it resolved here in 3D. Again, didn't focus much on the back. I knew you would never see it, and if they came back with it, then I could address it. But so one last little thing I did on him, which was really fun, was we knew he was going to communicate non-verbally. So I got a chance to do some fun little animation things in Photoshop to show maybe how this communication could work. And then turn in images too. The final one is way cooler than what I did. They made it this big like Vegas display of awesomeness, and I was like, oh, that's what they wanted. But this got the ball rolling, I think, to get the conversation started. They wanted him to give a thumbs up, so I was trying to figure out like what would alien iconography of thumbs up for a creature with 2 thumbs and 2 fingers look like, but and still be recognizable. And some of them got really wild and weird, and some of them trying to channel in a little Doctor Strange with a little bit of emoticon fun. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but Guardians of the Galaxy has a little bit of a sense of humor.
No.
And then another take on this. No blinky. And there it is in the final one. They did an amazing job on him. Look at those cool thumbs. Like, that's just awesome. Wish I was
But
that
you can also see how close to Ian's model that is, and that's because we can hand off, a design maquette.
Yep. And they can
for them to work off. Yeah,
tweak things to make it work how they need.
It's really cool. I love that part of it.
It's a very exciting process. Since we've both kind of shown all of our guys now, this was the scene. All that work, right? All that work you just saw was for a very, very quick scene of the last couple moments. He shows up a little bit in the middle, but overall, it's amazing how much you'll put into something for how long it's on screen. But I like to think
granted, they're putting this much effort into these characters because they want to have an open-ended potential. Yeah, not necessarily that they're going to use these characters, but they have new toys in their sandbox.
Yes. But is
it a question over there?
Oh yeah.
Let me get him.
Well, you walk over there. One of the things I loved about Star Wars as a
I'll
kid
come back to you.
was when you look on the back of the action figure thing and find like Zuckuss. You'd be like, he was not even on screen, and then he'd become your favorite toy. You'd run around with him with his little trench coat and think it was the neatest thing you've ever seen.
Here's your question.
Yeah.
When you're working, you've said you've worked on a bunch of movies, and there's things that you can't disclose to us, but on a normal project level, I don't even know if it would be per project because you're doing so many, how many, like, each of you individually, characters would you say you touch on, like, in a year, or like during the course of, like, your, like, are you tasked to say, like, those 2 characters, that was the project for a certain amount of time, or are you juggling characters? Like, how many characters? I'm just curious for each of you individually, like, could you say like I did 10 or I did like 1,000 or whatever? That's-
Oh boy.
I can answer this one. It's between those numbers. No, that's a hard one. I mean, one great thing about Marvel, and I think totally touched on this, we all kind of get a chance to play in those sandboxes, right? Especially early on, it's like, there's an alien in here, we don't know what it does, cool. So we all start running wild with it, and then suddenly they start honing in, and maybe 2 people are working on it. And then they pick one, and maybe that last person is working on it. But in terms of numbers.
It's hard to quantify. In terms of like characters, I don't know the exact number, but it can be hundreds and hundreds of iterations per single character. So it feels like a lot.
Yeah, it's every project's different, but yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. I mean, we kind of joke sometimes. We're like, our hard drive is full, and we realize we each got these computers kind of starting this new job, and you go, how did I fill up 4 terabytes of data?
Yeah, every show, every new movie, we usually get a new 2-3 terabyte drive.
It's a staggering amount of work. I mean, what you guys are even seeing here is not the full run of it. This is just kind of the stuff
This is just
cold.
a little tiny bit.
And what we did on it, honestly, is a tiny, tiny bit. We were very, very low on the totem pole on this show. Like we kind of came in to do some fun designs toward the end.
Yeah, we're freelance there. We're guests.
Yes.
They have their core
amazing
artists that are sort of lifers there.
And those guys
it's
touch
a
everything.
joy to be there with them. It's really fantastic.
Yeah, it is an honor. It's cool to be even a small part of any of this stuff. It's pretty amazing. So I'll show you guys the last thing I did here. Hopefully y'all have seen the movie. This is a little spoilery, so cover your ears if you haven't. But it's been all over the internet too, so I'd be impressed if no one knows about it. But there's one last little end tag that was in it that, as a cosmic Marvel fan, was me very excited about. We got to do some work on this is the one from the comic, on this Cocoon Design. So my original thoughts were that it would be very organic, and this one you can see is pretty much straight from the source.
This is Ian exercising his creepy.
Yeah. And that is the note I got. No.
Oh, hell no.
These are no. But a lot of fun. So after that, we kind of learned more about the sovereign and the people who were involved in, that's the right name, right? Who were involved in all of this aspect. I'm going to keep it vague, just in case anyone hasn't seen it. But gold was the big thing there. Gold. So originally I had like the gold chassis around stuff, but this is like, let's make it into something gold. So my first pass was kind of like a sarcophagus, a little bit organic, but still very, very machined out. Then maybe it's just containing something pretty organic, thinking of all that. But still really looking back to that original comic source. I love the comics, so I will oftentimes, especially if it's something close to me, do my best to at least give a nod to them, if not a full, pay complete homage to them. That, to me, is really important, and one of the things that makes the Marvel Universe stand out is that there's just this love of the source. This one is actually based on a real cocoon, and I'm drawing a blank on the name of the cocoon, but it actually looks like gold and iridescent metal. So some of these shapes I took from the patterning on it. And
in terms of ZBrush construction, how do you approach something like that?
It's a great question. I kind of black out, and then this thing appears. No, I think a lot of this started off as a Dynamesh sculpt. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it started off as this one that I simplified in Dynamesh, and then polygrouped the strips, extracted them, Z-remeshed them, ran polish a few times probably, and then I also had the original one beneath it, which you barely see, but you can see that there's a very organic kind of nature to it. So one of the nice things about ZBrush as a designer is you're not just starting from whole cloth every time. A lot of times you can say, well, I had that idea. If I throw another material on it, what would that look like? If I doubled it up and in Keyshot made one part transparent and one part glowing, what would that look like? There's a lot of options you have suddenly with ZBrush and Keyshot, especially together, you get these just amazing results relatively quickly. This entire Cocoon process was probably about 2 weeks of work. So if that gives you any idea. But these are much easier to do than a full character, right? So you can see this kind of looks like that last more organic one I had. Right, this kind of guy. But that was really squishy and organic, so I went back into it and turned it into something more mechanical, but still have some of that organic, almost like it was secreted. And in the end, this was the last one I did.
That's great.
And this is the one that was in the film, or a version of it. I'm sure they did a ton of work on it, but the feeling of this one was in the film. So I was able to keep some of the little nods to the comic with the little nodules on the side, the basic shaping of it, the glowing center eye, and then play a lot with, in terms of process. This was a lot of making brushes that were tubey and connecting things and just really having fun making a mess, but trying to make it a controlled mess.
This is nice and indicative of that sort of Marvel window strike zone that we were talking about, because the end result sort of has a little bit of his creepy in there, but it's mellowed out by sort of the sci-fi tech and whatever. You can see it's very indicative of their taste, style, and
story influencing it too, with the gold and the community that actually built this thing is no longer,
it's
not just like a cool thing, it's got a nod to why it's there.
Yeah, and like I said, being guests there, we've had to sort of learn that the hard way. The full-time guys there, they have that innate, a lot of that is their innate style. They've created that.
And most of them have been there a long time.
And then over the years, they breathe that design sense. So
it's really useful for us.
They can walk by and say, "Oh hell no!" It's like, stop us before we waste our time.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's nice there, is having the ability to have somebody who really understands the source and not just, I don't know who I'm doing this for. Everyone there really understands why we're all there.
Yeah.
So this was a key shot render of the Cocoon. Just you can see how much of it was tweaked over in Photoshop, but you get some pretty good results out of just key shot. And there it is in the final film.
There it is.
Yep. So that is that. Now, should we show the trailer and then do Q&A? Or
Do you want to do the Q&A first?
Yeah, let's do the Q&A first.
All right. Maybe wrap it up with the trailer.
Sounds good to me.
Sure. We'll take the question here in the front.
Hey, so when you guys are working on models that will potentially become a physical asset, like a costume, do you guys hand that off to another department, or do they come back to you and let you set up the attachment points, etc., for what will be printed, like for Iron Man, for example? Those kind of, or the Power Rangers would be a good example.
So the early stuff I show, like Rangers and stuff, that's not Marvel. That's personal work, or not personal, yeah, I guess you could call that. It's solo work that I did before working there. Those kind of things are really just designs. So when I'm working on that stuff, it was with the idea that something might get made, but really it's just, is this neat? Is this what they're looking for? Is this not what they're looking for? Because of the way that we work, we're able to hand those assets off. We both come from a background where, yes, we had to build that stuff. Nowadays, it's a little bit of a mix. We've each had to do some pretty finished stuff to hand off to other departments who then will take it to what they need, breaking it up for 3D printing or retopping it or whatever it's going to be. I think the two of us generally don't have to worry too much about like connection points and that kind of stuff, but there is some thought there.
Yeah, it's for the most part, fabrication is left to the vendors. We've both been around long enough that we have relationships with most of those guys. So we usually just talk directly to them, and they'll let us know what they need. And we'll let them know within our time frame what we can provide for them. So,
I mean, we work with some of the greatest like costume designers and vendors out there who oftentimes can take your rough idea or your rough model, and when you see it on screen, you're like, wow, they really took that into a whole new level.
Yeah.
Which is great. That's one of my favorite parts, when you can hand something off and the next time you see it, you're like, damn, they improved that a lot. So that's a pretty exciting part of the process.
Oh, way in the back. Coming.
Making them walk for it.
Hey guys, just want to ask, when you're posing something in ZBrush, like a character, can you talk about the process of how do you keep like the details, like for example, if like the arm is bending or something, how do you keep the detail in that?
Okay.
Well, there's a couple ways to pose stuff in ZBrush. For the longest time, I'd kick everything into Transpose Master, try to sub-D stuff, and with the Z-remesh and stuff. This is all sort of like this is again why I approach my posing at the very end. I do all my design work up front, usually in T-pose because it's quicker. And when you get to a point where you're ready to pose, then you can start creating sub-Ds on Dynamesh objects that you haven't done that yet or whatever. You get it to a point where you can manipulate it all at the same time in Transpose Master, whether that be masking in the transpose lines or something I've been playing with recently because we've been doing so many biped characters and stuff. I struggle sometimes with getting sort of natural human comfortable standing positions and stuff, so I've been playing with the Z-sphere rigging stuff, which lets everything relax a little, whereas my old style of masking specific limbs and moving one by one can be stiff sometimes.
It takes a lot of work, yeah. You gotta...
To get that feeling comfortable and relaxed takes a lot of time.
Yeah,
So-
I personally just use Transpose Master, but always looking at it from all the angles. I have found that if I have really dense, like, Dynamesh things that I haven't remeshed, that when I send back and forth, I can have issues. So I do try to remesh as much as possible, because ZBrush likes having like levels. It likes having
options. Yeah.
Yeah. So the lower res you can get stuff, the easier Transpose Master is.
Very much so.
On the parts that are really problematic, maybe they're just too dense, and like you go to move an arm and it takes 30 seconds to actually show up on the screen. I've been just leaving those off. When I send it over, I'll pose the whole guy out, and then like, okay, I need to move the glove over to here now, or the bracer over to here, whatever it's going to be. After the fact, any hard surface stuff. So sometimes I'll do that. I don't love doing that because I like seeing the gesture and everything all at once, so it can sometimes be a little problematic on that end, but I still love Transpose Master. I find it to be pretty natural for me.
What I do find myself doing a lot is because ZBrush has its own approach to perspective and camera, and then we're kicking stuff over to Keyshot quite a bit, which is fantastic. That bridge is like the best thing since Dynamesh. It's awesome. But there is a camera space difference between the two. So especially when posing, I jump back and forth a lot because depending on your focal length and perspective and
the camera's focused, everything. Could be.
That pose, the pose that you think you have changes drastically. So.
You'll think you have this dynamic, beautiful pose, and you send it over, and it looks like they're like, what did I do to this person? I can't even see their arms anymore.
Yeah.
So that's. I think that answers that question? Yeah, cool. Sure.
All right, we have time for maybe one more before they play the trailer. Which you need sound, obviously, for the computer,
yes,
right?
sound will be good.
Okay.
Actually, Tully will be doing the music. I will be doing the sound effects.
All right. Who's going to do the dancing?
That's both of us.
Here we go. One more question. Front.
One last question. Is there any traditional concept sculpting still being done in clay at Marvel at all?
I don't want to say no. Not in the past 2 years that I can think of. If you guys went to Comic-Con, you might have seen some really beautiful maquette work that was done, I believe, by Legacy, that we did the design work for. Some of them were more resolved than others, and then they would go in and do a lot of work as well. And those looked phenomenal, but those were 3D printed.
Yeah, even all the vendors that traditionally did mostly, clay sculpts and molding and whatever are moving mostly digital now.
Yeah, 3D printing, a lot of that.
Yeah.
We do a lot of, just the two of us, a lot of our designs, as you can see when we do the turntables and stuff in Pose, those are almost like digital maquettes, right? So those are really useful to see when you're trying to find a character and you don't want to spend a lot of money to get a maquette done. I don't know that, I mean, even like when you're doing helmet design, sometimes you'll get like the vendor will do a small 3D print of it to get approval, but I haven't seen much on that level of the clay sculpting. Sometimes the costume stuff, if they don't have the budget to do a 3D print or there's no asset, they'll sculpt it out.
Yeah.
But that's like
but
for the
it's
final.
drastically changing. It's really shifting to with the advent of all the printers and stuff. It's really changing that.
And the fidelity and the accuracy you get now is like.
Not only in the tools that we're using, but the tools now that they're using to capture likeness and body scans and stuff are so much more accurate. Before, especially if you were doing a costume that's very close to the body, your tolerances were beyond the body scans. You couldn't trust the body scan because of the technology that they were using. Now the stuff that they're doing, we're getting pore texture in our scans. It's
Eyelashes.
crazy. Yeah, it's really impressive.
Yeah.
So that fidelity lets us get that much more specific on our end and lets us go straight to print. So.
All right, we'll let you guys play the trailer, and then
Cool,
we'll
are we,
do the prizes, and then get you guys in the back.
But, oh no, we are, Mike, I'm sorry.
This is what we were originally brought on to do, and that's coming out pretty soon. So we figured we'd end on this one.
Yeah, it's coming out end of the month or early next month, I think.
Yeah.
It's a pretty fun one, so how do I make this real full screen? So we can't show the work we did on this, but if you pay close attention, you might see some. Here we go.
So much has happened since I last saw you. I lost my hammer, like yesterday, so that's still pretty fresh. And then I went on a journey of self-discovery, where I met you. Where are we? You have no idea. Hela, the goddess of death, has invaded Asgard.
Oh, I've missed this.
And you and I had a fight recently.
Did I win?
No, I won, easily.
Doesn't sound right.
Well, it's true.
Asgard is dead. And it'll be reborn in my image. I thought you'd be glad to see me.
I need to stop her here and now to prevent Ragnarok, the end of everything. So I'm putting together a team. Like the old days. Surprise! This will be such fun. Hello. Hi.
He's a fighter.
Here we go! I'm not a queen or a monster. I'm the goddess of death. What were you the god of again?
We're the same, you and I. Just a couple of hot-headed fools.
Yeah, same. Hulk like fire, Thor like water.
Well, kind of both like fire.
But Hulk like raging fire, Thor like smoldering fire.
All right, so that was for the trailer. Now give a round of applause for Ian and Tully, all right? Thank you.